everybody. Welcome back to Bill Whittle's Hot Mic. In our second segment, we've been talking with Dr. David Grantham of the National Center for Policy Analysis, been talking about news bias. And David, I want to talk to you about something a little bigger because, frankly, we can and have and will continue to point out these stories and show people how news is being orchestrated, fabricated, and all the rest. But I'd like to get your opinion on motivation. Why? Why are they doing this? I have a theory. I kind of like to hear yours. The first time I heard the term fake news that I can remember hearing it was when Hillary Clinton announced, 2-3 days after she lost the most winnable election in history, apparently, that it was all a result of fake news about all of her server problems and everything. Why do you think this bias is so widespread, and why do you think that the mainstream media is destroying their product? Their product is credibility. That's what they sell. What is the motivation to go this far over the edge so often?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a succinct answer for you, but I often point back to, it's kind of a philosophical answer, if you will, but I often point back to the difference between your political identity and identity politics and the love of your country, or the framework that you live under a constitutional republic. And it's kind of high-minded, but at the same time, I think it really explains and helps anticipate where these ideas come from and these reactions. Because when you look at identity politics, when your identity is wrapped up in the politics of it, then there is no level of disregard that you will reach, because at the end of the day, your identity is really all you have. Versus looking at it as, we have a country to protect, we have to provide something, a semblance of truth within a world that's lacking of it. And the U.S. really represents that by far and away more than any other country and nation in the history of the world. So, but when your ideas are wrapped up in identity politics and the fact that those politics define who you are, then when someone comes along like Donald Trump, who is probably one of the more abrasive and one of the more promising individuals who could break through that identity and cripple what you've built your identity on, big government, big spending, then that becomes a problem for you internally and as a person, not just merely as an operation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when the leftists started their takeover of America through the culture, they began with journalism schools. They realized if they could teach young journalists to be leftists and progressives, then they could basically control the information flow. The best spin you can put on this, in my opinion, is that reporters, these left-wing reporters, think that there's the truth and then there's the truth. And the little truth is what actually happens, but the big truth is what should happen. And if the little truth and the big truth don't agree, then you make up the actual truth because of your big objective. I mean, that's, I think, the very best possible spin you can put on it. I think the worst spin you can put on it is that these people are absolutely terrified that Donald Trump has circumvented them and has gone around them, that he's tweeting directly to the American public. And not only is he putting them essentially out of work, but he's mocking them while he's doing it. And while they're used to being criticized, I don't think they're used to being laughed at. Do you think these reporters, the New York Times and Washington Post, by the way, Washington Post's banner motto now is democracy dies in darkness, which I happen to think is their mission statement. But what about it? Do you think it's personal? Because it certainly seems personal. They don't like the fact that Donald Trump plays this game better than they do, I think.
Oh, it's absolutely, it's absolutely personal. Who's involved and the extent of it, maybe is negotiable, but it's definitely personal, because the level and the vitriol that's emanating from the media outlets is, I shouldn't say surprising, but it kind of is. I think the real key, though, is seeing that we're at a junction, we're at a turning point, and in our political history, in our economic history, we've come to a point where we have to make some very tough, very hard decisions. And there is one side that has for a long time advocated for more and more government, more and more spending. Mm-hmm. They see that realized with President Obama. They were getting there. And then when Bernie Sanders comes along, he's offering, like Rush Limbaugh says, it's hard to run against Santa Claus, and that's what Sanders was representing. So they saw almost the culmination of their wildest dreams from Obama to Sanders, and then Hillary would at least have maintained what Obama had built. Trump's coming along and just putting a wrecking ball to that type of spending, and that's just one example. But I think when you're on the edge of what you believe to be a final answer, and all your dreams are looking to be realized, and someone comes through and just takes it the opposite
Yeah.
direction, you can't respond to that with just a mere facts-driven analysis.
No, that's exactly right, David. Uh, this is what the news media people, the Hollywood celebrities, and the Democratic politicians have in common. And that's this emotional immaturity that does not allow them to deal with defeat, and they simply have to have a temper tantrum and stamp their feet. The good news is that they're not being able to get away with it anymore, thanks to people like you and the work you do over at the National Center for Policy Analysis. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about in the future.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Folks, that's really pretty much it. They are. This is personal for them. They hate the idea that the American people spoke up and went against their wishes. That's why Hollywood is so upset. That's why the news media is so upset. And that's why these politicians, Republicans as well in many cases, are so upset. Donald Trump bothers them. They think it's because of his personality. But what really bothers them about Donald Trump, I think, is the presence of Donald Trump when they have all together decided, all the smart people who went to Harvard know each other and go to the same cocktail parties. Well, those people decided who the next president was going to be, and didn't seem to be much in doubt. Hollywood was behind it. Washington was behind it. The New York news media was behind it. All the important people were behind it. And those American people, those rotten, low-life scoundrels, got up on their hind legs and just ran the whole thing off the rails. How dare they? How dare they tell us how to tell them how to run the country? That's what happened. That's why they'll never get over it. I hope they never get over it. It's really fun watching heads explode. Hey, speaking of exploding heads, turns out that we've got two good news stories that we talked about last week. The stories are horrible, but the results are kind of cool. Let's talk about the first one. As you probably know, we talked last week about a show that's running in the Shakespeare in the Park in New York City. It's one of the nice things about New York City is open air Shakespeare presentations. They are doing a production of Julius Caesar. And as you probably remember from your Shakespeare, because most of our audience has read books as opposed to most of the other audiences on the other side, as you can see here, this one is set in the present day. That's not unusual, but the blonde wigged Caesar is being knifed to death. And guess who that person is? Well, it's Donald Trump. And the reason we know it's Donald Trump is not just because he looks like Donald Trump, but the actor who plays him has played Donald Trump on many other occasions. So here's a chance for those New York City tolerance-loving, accepting, peace-loving progressives to really get a chance to watch Donald Trump being repeatedly knifed to death and cheer away. Well, unfortunately for them in this production, the sponsors of this show, many of them have been sponsors for quite a long time, have decided, you know what, this has actually crossed a line, and we all know what's going on here. Don't lie to us. The producers of the show saying, we're not inciting violence or suggesting any violence towards the presidents. Spare me, please. If you're going to lie to me like that, come lie to my face so I can answer. Of course you are. Of course you are. This is progressive murder porn is what it is. We didn't mean to suggest that this is the president or that we intended any violence towards him. Please, please, we're not as stupid as you think we are. We couldn't be. So there's that. But the good news is Bank of America, out of there. Delta Airlines said, no, this crosses a line and this isn't art. This is just plain disgraceful, and we're out of there. So thank you, Delta Airlines. Thank you, Bank of America. And if we keep up the pressure, there will be more of these people removing their sponsorship. Let's be crystal clear about this, by the way. These people have a right to produce Shakespeare any way they want to. They absolutely do. They have a right to put on a show and stage it any way they want to do it. And if they want to do that, so long as they're not openly calling for the murder of the president, that is their artistic right, and it's defended by the First Amendment. A lot of our finest people have died defending their right to be this obnoxious and this terrible. However, we have a right to free speech too. And our right to free speech says that we can protest this, we can demand that these things are stopped, we can talk about boycotting these sponsors, and we have, and it has a great effect. And a smaller case, same story though. We talked to you also last week about a lovely man named was it Rez? Yeah, Rez Aslan, host of a CNN show, their resident zombie. He ate human brains on television. This guy, who called Donald Trump a piece of S, and he called his son a piece of S, and he said, "Oh, I just lost my temper." No, he's made plenty of quotes like that. Turns out he was fired from the one job he was able to manage to put together, which was talking about religion and tolerance. I can't make this kind of stuff up, folks. So he's gone too. So that's good news. And altogether, I think what it really shows us is this: we have been swallowing this nonsense from these people. Nonsense is the kindest word I can come up with at the moment off the top of my head, for coming on 40 years now. But as we mentioned earlier with our guest, the internet is the first time in history when common people can talk to each other. When people like you and people like me, who didn't go to Harvard Law School but were smarter than they are, we have a chance now to talk to each other and to fight back. We have a chance to fight back and communicate and organize. That's what the NRA is. It's what the NRA is about, what it's always been about. And the idea that the National Rifle Association, which has been, in my mind, the single greatest defender of our Second Amendment rights, well, without question, that's obviously true, is now, in fact, turning out to be one of the biggest defenders of our First Amendment rights as well, and one of our defenders of our rights to have actual information and all the rest of these things. You know, the media is supposed to be the immune system of the body. It's supposed to be the cells that go out and root out the truth and destroy lies. The job of the media, as it was well said, is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. Doesn't say anything about only if they're Democrats or only if they're Republicans. When the country loses its immune system, you get these kind of autoimmune diseases like we've got now. But fortunately, the American people are rising up and coming through us through things like the internet and like this program and like this network. So I'm enormously proud to be a part of it. Thank you very much for joining us today on Bill Whittle's Hot Mic. We'll be back tomorrow. There'll be more news and more idiocy for us to puncture, and we'll do it with a big smile on our face because it's kind of fun. We'll see you tomorrow.